Welcome to the Oasis Podcast. My name is John Mark Yoder, and I'm here with Wayne Weaver. And we are talking about what would we share with a 29-year-old man starting out in ministry. And we're doing this because you are facing several milestones in your life. 40 years of ministry this month.
That is long.
Yeah, that's ordained ministry. At 29, you were already ministering because the Holy Spirit had baptized you. You were filled with the Spirit. You were doing ministry. And then you were ordained. But you're also coming up on another milestone in just about a month and a half. And that is 70 years.
Yeah.
Wow. You don't seem that seasoned, and I think you're a young 70 years, but 70 years is another milestone. That's a lot of life, a lot of experience. And so what we're looking at in a couple of episodes here is what would you, knowing what you've known, experiencing what you've experienced from that vantage point, thinking back to 29-year-old Wayne Weaver, what would you advise him in a number of things? And so we had one episode where we talked about how would you advise him in relation to family and home. But now I want to ask you, how would you advise a young, about to be ordained minister about the church and the community of faith? About God, about uncertainty, about the future, and about life, and even mortality. You were looking at what God was doing through you, feeling the call of God on your life. Knowing what you know now, how would you have advised that young pastor? And I want to just read a couple of verses that I believe have become key verses. I've heard them from you numerous times, and one of those is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And then Proverbs 16:3, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. And I know that rolls into business as well, but specifically for this episode, we'd like to talk about how would you advise that young, about to be ordained pastor, from what you know now, if you could go back and speak to him and say, you know what, this is what God does. This is the God you will serve throughout your ministry. What would you tell the uncertain of the future, but certain of the call, Wayne Weaver?
That's a big order. At 29, you have no experience. You have some experience, but from my perspective, at age 70, you have no experience, basically. But
you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. You have no options. You have to start. And I started with a zeal. And one thing I note that I would say that when I look back, I had a zeal, tremendous zeal. Not always according to knowledge. And but for the most part, I would say that I did not make many mistakes in that. I had one thing in mind, and that is to return back to the Bible and not twist it to fit my opinions. That was one of my callings, to present the Bible in its fullness of what it says and leave nothing out. Now, here's the other thing, to always be aware that there's other people that are also in ministry that have a different interpretation, perhaps of the same verse, and to be respectful of that. I think what I look at, if I would now, look back to a 29-year-old, if he would be sitting at this table, what all would I tell him? I don't know that I could in 15 minutes even scratch on the surface things that would be important to reveal or say. So we can only touch some very basics.
Yeah. What would you speak to him about trusting God, for instance?
Well, there will be times where you go through where it looks like everything is collapsing and everybody's against you and the whole world is against you. And it will always seem that way because a lot of times there's a devil behind it. And so he blows the picture up very big. It looks massive. But God's also in this picture, and it's through this time that you don't really see much of God in this picture because the devil is so angry, it seems, and so loud and so vicious, and that's what gets your attention. And the thing that I think would be so good for all preachers to hear, this also will pass away. Now, I will also say this, that if there is, in my lifetime, there was twice that our church went through difficulties. And it happened, and this is what I would say.
Yeah.
Mark some people. Mark them if they're problem causers. And Bible even tells us, mark them that cause division. But here's what I found, that in our cases, the primary, or in the cases that I went through, that the primary people that caused the division moved in from other areas. And they came with the idea of just really wanting to learn about God, very as opposite as wolf as you can get, very sheep-like. I remember the first one said, I just want to sit at Jesus' feet. And I looked to the other minister and said, I don't think he knows how Jesus' feet looks like. And they caused such a big, huge problem. But they carried it with them. Mark them that move in from other places that have all kinds of problems with their preachers they came from, because they'll have the same problems here. Mm-hmm. And the other one was, again, somebody that moved in. And he moved in, and here's the problem that people should be careful. When they move in from another area, they often come with secret desires of self-promotion, pretty much all. And I noticed that, and both of these cases were. And what diminished them was when one saw that he cannot go further than singing. And all at once, he misread and infected the church. And he was like a bull in a china shop, really. And the Bible says every so often these people will come through and they'll take people
Savage
with them.
Wolves,
yeah, they will. They'll take people with them. And just remember that this is not your church. You're not the head of the church. Jesus is the head of the church. You do your best. You stay patient, extremely patient. Extremely patient. Patience that you naturally will not even have. That you stay patient and don't overreact, never overreact, and be confident. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that needs to be seen in a true leader. Here's the thing. There's different callings in people's lives. The one calling is one to lead out. Well, that's the calling that I had on my life. And for that is you have to be a father-like figure. You have to care for the little details in someone's spiritual life. And they have to know that you care, because you truly do. You're very compassionate. If it takes 10 hours to work through with one person, you will have the patience to do that because you're a father. I just had a phone call, too, this past week from somebody that they just felt the pastor in their church is just so not a father. He's short with them, and he even over the pulpit made statements that, if you don't like me, get out of here. You're not welcome here anyways. We don't want you here. Go, leave. That's not father voice. A father's voice, and it depends on your calling, but a father's voice is always drawing. Now, there's times when the father corrects, but he corrects with love, and the people sense that. Some children will never accept their father. They will rebel against the father, and you'll have that in church as well. But my thing is identify exact calling that God has called you to, and then perfect that and linger around that. And God can always change that to something else. But there should be within every leader, every preacher, there should be a convincing answer within your heart that you know this is exactly where God called me for this purpose. I remember when Steve and I, we went through a very rocky time there. That one time, the two times we went through. The one time, I just saw no future anymore. I think I'm done. I just don't know. It's not that I'm so discouraged. I think everything pointed against me. I'm done. I don't know that there's a way out. I was done. I just don't see that there is. It's not that I am discouraged where I can't go on. No, it wasn't that. It was I was done. It's like
so. Was that a question of? Was that a question of saying is my calling finished? Or
yeah.
Okay,
this is where I stop. I cannot go on. I see no way through this. You're coming up to a river where you thought was a bridge, and there's no bridge there. What do? Do you keep on walking? And I looked at Steve, and I just said, Steve, I don't know that I have any other option. I'm done. I can't go on.
And what was his response?
This was his response. Well, then he said, well, if you're done, I'm done. And I was hoping that he would say, well, okay, I'll continue. But he said, no, I've been called to walk with you. That was a turning point in my life, the way I knew Steve. He said he was called to walk with me. That means he's not going to leave me. You can trust him. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This is important, but he knew what he was called to do. Now, if you notice, as I'm getting older, and my heart gave me an issue, now his heart gave him an issue, and we're both kind of speaking the same language. We know that we come into diminished responsibilities because of our. You just can't function same. It's designed that way. And so when I look at that is it the importance of knowing why you're called, what you're called. And I never felt in my life that Steve wanted to stand in my shoes. Never. He's made that clear. Not only that, not by saying it. His support for me confirmed that, and there was never a threat that way. So when I look at that, is be comfortable with what you're called to do, understand what that calling is, and perfect that calling, and that's where you'll function the best.
So now there's
really important.
That's very important. Now you mentioned the whole aspect of mortality and actually.
Yeah.
Diminished responsibility. For the 29-year-old just starting off and looking at the future ahead, what would you advise him with regard to that? That one day things will diminish. I know we've talked about this and you said how often you just felt like, well, there's just it just goes on. What would be advice to a young man as he
I know
looks
exactly
at that?
how to answer that. I wish I would have been told that. But see, in our church here, when we started out as a result of being rejected by where we came from. We were told to leave. I was told to leave. I could not, I knew that I was called for this church. And so I need to stay there. Even if I'm persecuted, if I'm ridiculed, if they do whatever, this is where you've been called to. The only exit would be that if they ask you to leave, then you need to leave. So I waited until they asked me by letter to leave. That was my only way that I could leave. That was the only way that I felt it was scriptural. Right. For me to disagree with someone and up and leave and start something else, to me, was not scriptural. And it had to do with the calling that was on my life for deliverance, that the laws of the unseen world and the heavenlies, this is what you see. You never respond to rebellion. You do not rebel. You stay until you're asked to leave, and then you leave your peace and make no comments. You go, and you're done. So what happens then is nobody wanted, because of the doctrine of the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Nobody wanted me around, which the only one would be the charismatic church, in which I wasn't comfortable with that, with what I've seen in it either.
Right.
Was introduced to it, but yeah. So where do I go? I had no leader above me. There was nobody a bishop that would instruct me. I had to fight my way through. It was difficult. Many times. And I'd look to the Bible. Okay, God, show me this. I couldn't go by, well, this is the way we've always done it. Those are ruts. That's if I can speak to people that come from those persuasions, that would be the easiest way to be a minister. You just stay by the rules, and you have a fence you draw around and let people, if they step outside, you talk to them, leave them inside. That's it. You don't even have to carry much of a burden, just as long as you keep them in the fence. That's a problem. That's not the way God has designed this. And I would recommend all those people to go back and look at true church history, how it used to be all the way back from after Jesus. It was a community. We now have returned a lot of places to community churches where there is a mix. That was the original plan. It was a community church often. It was a town that had a church. That's the way it was. And it's the split stuff is basically has been very pronounced from our background of people, back from the Reformation on up. And I'm not saying that was wrong, but it's in the DNA. If you don't agree with someone, just leave. This is a problem. This is not how it works. And I believe amongst preachers, if there is a disagreement, we need to bend and we need to talk. I want your viewpoint. I think you've been around me long enough now to know that I depend a lot on what I hear from the ministry. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this? I want to hear that, because I have the wisdom to hear. Okay? Mm-hmm. But sometimes I don't have the wisdom in here. All right? That's important.
And that's a key distinction.
It really is. It is. And so you learn from each other. And in business, same way. But this is very big. And in that you can learn. You can learn. Now, and you have it's a unified learning, and you walk and you keep on going. This is very important. And also for me, it's never your opinion where the church is foundationed on. Never your opinion. Your opinion is nothing. It's what the will of God says. Mm-hmm. There's things that I might want, but I refrain from even teaching it if it's my own thing. I will not. I am here to do the will of God, not my own will.
You know, we really need to do this in another.
Frames.
Yeah, we need to do another.
Are we finished already?
We're out of time on this episode. But you know what? I think we should do is actually pick up on that, because I still would like to ask you what you would tell a young man who is looking at the future and doesn't realize the end is coming. You started on that, but we'll pick that up in another episode.
I can tell you very quick. Doesn't take time.
All right.
At 65, you start thinking different, and you will have diminished skills in everything you're doing. And you need to consider that. And I want to instruct that to all the ministry that come after me in this, that at the age of 65, you do not need to feel guilty. Yeah, pick out that age, and I think it should be reasonable. 65 is a good one. 65, then look to see how else you can function. I think it's the guilt of, I still have passion, I still have burden, I still have ministry, I still have that. But where do you stop? And there's guilt that keeps you going, and that's not good.
That's not a good motivation.
No, it's not good.
That's actually, wow. All right. Well, I hate to break into this right here, but we will pick up again in another episode. Thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you are hearing, or if you've been ministered to by it, please do drop us a line. Let us know how God is working in your life through these episodes. And you can send those responses to library@oasistabernacle.org. It's an email address, library@oasistabernacle.org. We'd love to hear from you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.